we decided that we were going to change things because it wasn't a matter of whether or not it was actually possible. It was that because it was what happened to us was so awful, it didn't matter what people considered possible. We were going to make what many considered impossible possible for the sake of our classmates.
Welcome to the LBJ Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. I'm Mark Updegrove. As an author, journalist, television commentator, and CEO of the LBJ Foundation, I've had the privilege of talking to some of the biggest names and best minds of our day about our nation's rich history and the pressing issues of our times. Now we bring those conversations straight to you. David Hogg's life was forever changed by the mass shooting he experienced at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida in 2018, which led to his life as an activist and co-founder of the nonprofit organization March for Our Lives. He has since become one of the leading voices of his generation. Tonight he talks about his quest to reduce gun violence, the power of social movements, and what makes his generation, Gen Z, different from other generations of Americans. David Hogg, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The shootings at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, changed your life in ways I'm sure you could not possibly imagine. So what do you remember most about that day?
I think what I remember most about that day was the fear that my classmates had, the uncertainty, the anger, the existential dread of not knowing whether or not they were going to survive. And I say that knowing now, of course, that the shooting happened in the building next to where I was. But when you're in a school shooting, because Parkland, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, my high school, is an outdoor school. It may be hard for some people that didn't grow up with palm trees to understand what our school looks like, but it's an outdoor school. There's multiple buildings, so we could hear gunshots ringing out and echoing between the buildings, but you don't know if there's multiple shooters on campus at the time. And I will always remember the fear that my classmates had and how also angry they were simultaneously that this was happening. As we grew up as a generation hearing from our politicians that constantly gave us their thoughts and prayers, that the answer to this was simply to have our teachers be our bodyguards, essentially, and demand that they have the courage to stand up. I just met a teacher today here in Texas at an event that I was doing who told me that as part of the trainings, they're instructed to basically be a human shield for their students here in Texas. And that is so upsetting and ridiculous to me because we shouldn't be asking teachers like my mom or teachers like that one that I met earlier today to have the courage to lay their lives down simply because our politicians have refused to have the courage to stand up to the NRA and the gun lobby to protect our students and not, somebody like the shooter at my high school's quote-unquote right to an AR-15 when he had repeatedly threatened to shoot at my high school.
So you've written that your life may have been saved by a janitor. How did that happen?
Well, as we were leaving our classroom going to our fire evacuation zone, because, it was a freezing cold day in February in South Florida. It was 70 degrees. Our door was open to our classroom. So we could hear people outside talking. We could hear what was going on outside of our classroom and everything going on in between the buildings because, it echoes. And I distinctly remember looking at my classmate and saying, hey, we both looked at each other and said we heard something that sounded like a gunshot. Turned to a teacher, and right as she closed the door, we started evacuating. And as we were evacuating, a flood of students started going in the opposite direction of where we were going, presuming it was a fire drill, possibly. And as we were going towards our evacuation zone, a flood of students starts going in the opposite direction of where we were going. So we instinctually start following them. And as we're running towards the general direction that they were running in, unbeknownst to us, that was actually where the shooting was occurring at the time, which was we were running towards the freshman building. And right as we were about to cross in front of the freshman building where, to the best of my recollection at the time, the shooter was trying to shoot down from either the second or third story window to try to simulate what happened in Las Vegas, for example. Thankfully, he wasn't able to do that because miraculously, I think the glass was somehow bulletproof because it was rated for hurricanes. Right as we were about to be in front of the freshman building, some janitor stopped us and said, "Don't come this way, he's over here," and directed us into the nearest classroom, which was our culinary class.
So, but as horrifying and as deadly as the shooting was, you write that the shooting made us stronger instead of destroying us. How so?
I think it was because for the first time in my generation's existence, we could talk about it. And we grew up with it too. And what I mean by that is I was born a year after Columbine happened. My generation has grown up in the thick of this. I remember learning about Sandy Hook when I think I was in middle school when that happened, and being so angry that this continued to happen and thinking to myself, like, something has to change, right? And then it didn't. And I think the reason why it made us stronger is because we, as a generation, for the first time, we had the agency to actually do something instead of just listening to these politicians send their thoughts and prayers. Because finally we were gaining the right to vote that thankfully was granted to us by previous generations that helped to sign the 26th Amendment into law that lowered the voting age. And we were just furious. And it was a galvanizing moment for our generation where we said, you know what? We may not be adults fully yet, but it's clear that the adults that are in power clearly don't know what they're doing. And it's time for some new leadership. And if the government doesn't change our gun laws, it's time to change who's in government by turning out record numbers of young people to vote. And that's just what we did.
So were you conscious of the possibility of gun violence before the shooting? Was that something that you carried in your mind, that possibility? When I was a young person, we had duck and cover drills in the event of a nuclear holocaust. And I'm not sure it registered, but it was a drill that we went through. So you knew that there was the possibility that something might happen. Did you have that same realization as you were going to school every day?
I did. I think any student in America has that realization, and it's horrifying because we know that one day there could be a school shooting. And I knew about it especially because of my experience in speech and debate, where I had to argue for 4 years on both sides of the gun control issue. I had to argue for and against universal background checks, for example. And in speech and debate, you can't just argue one side, you have to argue equally strong on both. And from that, I knew the statistics of school shootings. I knew how prevalent gun violence was in the United States as well. And as a result, I knew it was a possibility. Of course, you never think that it's actually going to happen at your school, though.
Right.
The day that the shooting happened, in fact, many people thought that it might just be a drill because there's oftentimes live fire with blanks or whatever to simulate a school shooting during some of these drills. And as a result, we did think it was a possibility, but you never think it's going to happen to you. Because Parkland was the safest community in Florida. My family moved to Parkland because it was the safest community that we could find with some of the best education. And if it can happen in Parkland, it can happen anywhere.
So it's not easy to create a social movement, but that's exactly what you did by helping to co-found March for Our Lives. How did that come about?
So after the shooting, a group of classmates and I came together. We were put in a group chat that a group of students had started to put together about what are we going to do about this. And I had been on TV talking in the aftermath of the shooting, not originally as an activist, but as a student journalist, because I didn't want talking heads on Fox News or CNN that had no idea what it was like in Parkland, had never been there, and had frankly debated this issue for the past 20 years and got practically no progress on it, to be dictating the narrative around what happened at my school. I wanted my classmates to be able to have their own voice and speak out on their own terms instead of letting the media dictate what was and wasn't newsworthy. And that's why I started speaking out, because I knew how to talk on camera because of my experience in TV production, because I wanted to be a broadcast journalist when I was in high school. And also I knew about the gun policy because of my experience in speech and debate. And the way that we started organizing was as I was on TV and as I was working to get other students on TV too, we got put in this group chat and we showed up on a friend's living room floor to help organize. And we decided that we were going to try to do a march in Washington, and we thought that we would also try to get people up to Tallahassee to try to change gun laws. And when we showed up there, many people said to us, when we were planning on showing up there, many people said to us, this is impossible. It's terrible what happened to you kids, but nothing's going to change because this is Florida, and gun laws don't get stronger here, they get weaker. And like any teenager, or any group of teenagers, there's nothing more that we like to do than what we were told that we couldn't, right? Because there's a little rebel in every teenager.
Or you don't say.
Yeah, as any parent could tell you. And we decided that we were going to change things because it wasn't a matter of whether or not it was actually possible. It was that because it was what happened to us was so awful, it didn't matter what people considered possible. We were going to make what many considered impossible possible for the sake of our classmates, so that this didn't have to continue, and hopefully somebody else wouldn't have to know this pain ever again. And because of that, we showed up at our state legislature. It was in session. It was right before the election, so we knew that we could help pressure them a lot. And we ended up raising the age to buy a gun to 21 in Florida. And we passed a red flag law that has since been used over 19,000 times to disarm people that are a risk to themselves or others in Florida alone. And part of the challenge with this work is we can't talk about the shooting that doesn't happen, right? But we know in these instances that there's been so many people that were serious dangers to themselves that were not able to go out and murder other people because of the passage of that law. And what's interesting too is the group who uses it most is Republican sheriffs. So it's a bipartisan issue, and those laws have still not been repealed in Florida because they were used so effectively. And the Sheriff's Association really supports it as well. So it's not easy to help found that social movement, but thankfully we also were standing on the shoulders of giants. In particular, there's been many, when we decided to do that march, we thought we'd get about 90 people to Washington, D.C. with us, and we ended up having over 800,000 march with us, and we had over 800 marches around the world on every continent except the one with penguins. And what enabled us to do that wasn't that we had a huge network of people that we knew in every single state. It's that we went out there and said, we're going to try to make this change, and if this is going to happen, it's going to be incumbent on whether or not other young people show up and decide to make it possible. And what helped to enable that more than anything was really powerful Black and brown women that had led the gun safety movement for decades before Parkland, but had never got and still haven't got the attention or credit that they deserve, that enabled us to scale so quickly. People like Amber Goodwin here in Austin, Texas, people like Erica Ford in New York, people like Pastor Mike in Oakland, California, and so many others that have been doing this work for decades that enabled us to really scale that so quickly, because we didn't start the gun safety movement. I would say that we added a significant chapter, but it was just that. It was one more chapter that we added to a book that started long before us.
I want to come back to your chapter, but let me pan out for a moment and give you some statistics from Pew Research. A majority of Americans, over 6 out of 10, say it's too easy to legally obtain a gun in this country, and nearly as many, 58%, favor greater gun restrictions. So at a 30,000-foot level, David, why is it so hard to get gun reform into law?
The filibuster. It's as simple as that. Far more than the NRA, far more than any other organization. The reason why it is so hard for us to get comprehensive federal gun reform is because we have a system of government that does not necessarily represent the people, specifically with regards to the Senate, as much as it represents rural areas and land more than it does people. And far more than that even, we have this archaic law or rule that has been around that was first weaponized as a tool to suppress fights against Jim Crow, right? And systemic racism and civil rights. And we're seeing used over and over again to stifle any progress on many of the issues that are affecting Americans so greatly in this country. And the biggest obstacle to us passing comprehensive gun reform is the filibuster. And that is why those polls, despite showing that people are so supportive of it, it's proven so hard for us to get any gun legislation passed.
Let me quote you. You write in your book, #NeverAgain, it happens the same way every time. A bunch of kids get killed, then their parents ask for some modest reforms to gun regulations. Then the conspiracy theorists and the NRA and Fox News start ranting about the Nazi communists who want to destroy America by taking away everyone's guns. Do you see that paradigm ever changing?
Yes. I think part of the the major obstacle that we've seen is that after Parkland, there were so many conspiracy theories that were spread about us, saying that the shooting, for example, at my school was fake. That people said to us that we were paid government actors that were here to take everybody's guns and other ridiculous things like that. For a long time, I didn't understand why those were so prevalent, but I came to understand why. And it comes down to two things. One, it's that our education system did such a good job of uniquely preparing us in some ways. Many of us knew how to talk on camera and how to talk about the gun policy, right? When we went out there and started speaking out, it was so unbelievable to people that we knew what we were talking about as a group of teenagers. Because they have so little faith in our education system, it was more believable to millions of Americans that we worked for the FBI or some other government agency than that our education system could have actually done its job, which says a lot about how Americans view our education system and how little faith they have in it, which is extremely unfortunate. But the second thing is, too, the NRA, after these shootings, always says that you can't talk about this because if you talk about this, you're politicizing tragedy, right? That's always what they say.
Sure.
Now, let me ask you this. If the very young people who survived a school shooting are saying you need to do something, how are you supposed to say to them, you're politicizing this, when the very people that went through this are saying you need to do something? You can't say that. So what you need to do is concoct such a disgusting and ridiculous story in the form of this conspiracy theory that smear campaign of those young people becomes the story instead of what those young people are actually saying in the first place. And those two reasons are why so much of that has happened, along with the commodification of hatred that we've seen, where people like Alex Jones can go out and make millions of dollars spreading ridiculous lies about people like myself, that then results in not only him getting millions of dollars, but also activists getting death threats. My family got probably well over 100 death threats in the year after the shooting, including my own mother. It's a direct violation of our First Amendment rights to make our voice heard. It is intimidation to try to stop us from speaking out because they know the power of these young people speaking out in the first place. So instead of trying to actually argue with us with logic, they have to concoct these disgusting conspiracy theories so that smear campaign becomes the story instead of people actually listening to what I am saying.
So you talked about you alluded to the personal cost of your activism. There have been threats on your life. There have been threats on the lives of the members of your family. A well-known Republican congresswoman has called you a coward and a crisis actor. Your family's been harassed. What keeps you going?
Knowing that I'm going to outlive them. Knowing that I have the greatest asset that anybody can have on their side in politics, which is that it's not money that motivates me. It's not just blind power that motivates me. It's being on the right side of history to help change this issue, where every other country doesn't have this problem, including the countries like Switzerland, because they have an extremely strong regime of regulations around firearm ownership. All I want is a similar system. If you own a gun, you should need to go through the same process as you need to own a car, right? You should need a license, you should need insurance, you should need to have it registered. I think it's basic common sense things like that can really help reduce and prevent things like happened in Parkland. And I know that with the platform and privilege that I've been given to help other people and help end things like happen or prevent things like happen in Parkland from ever happening again, that there's so much good I can do with that and so much good that has come from that I'll never stop doing it.
What makes your generation, Generation Z as it's called, different from previous generations of Americans?
I think the level of anxiety that we have about the future is what makes Gen Z different to some extent. And I think that's because of a combination of factors. I think the plurality of what causes that is social media, actually, and the algorithms that have been weaponized against our children to essentially turn them into products for advertisers, because it's often said on the internet, if you're using a service for free, you are the product.
Right.
And I think that has played the biggest role of all. But I also think it's seeing our government fail to act on things like school shootings, right? Previous generations went through lockdown drills, as you mentioned, for nuclear bombs. The difference was that those bombs never went off in the U.S. at least.
Right.
Right. The bomb is now going off multiple times a year with these school shootings. So it is far more real for these young people. And then I think the anxiety that they have about the climate catastrophe that we're going through right now, and our government's large failure to successfully address that as well. And the corruption of our political system, where so many young people have lost faith that anything is ever going to get better because they see Democrats and Republicans both taking corporate money, both, being owned by a lot of the same special interests and feeling like nobody truly represents them. Which is why I'm doing the work now with my organization, Leaders We Deserve, to elect young people who don't take corporate money, to help give those young people faith that change is possible. Because what I fear for my generation, it's not any one person or politician. What I fear is that we will fall into the trap of cynicism and hopelessness that brought us here. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy that says that the system is so corrupt, the politicians are so corrupt, the system is so broken that nothing is ever going to get better, so you might as well not even bother trying. And if we bought into that after Parkland, I may have had to bury my own mother, because a man who sent her a death threat, we were able to use some of the laws that we passed after Parkland to disarm. If we bought into that cynicism and hopelessness, several thousand people would probably be dead right now in Florida because of the 19,000 times that red flag law has been used to disarm people that are at risk to themselves or others. And for our generation, I just hope that we don't give up.
So you've seen in your generation a recognition of the failure of our government in meeting the needs of a younger generation of Americans, but we also see an erosion in our faith in democracy. Where does that come from?
The failure of our government to respond. It's the erosion that we're seeing of faith in democracy, I would directly pin on the failure of our government to respond, because here's the thing. We have a system of government that is theoretically supposed to be in some ways majoritarian, right? If you have a majority in the Senate, you should be able to govern, even though that's not actually proportionally representational to how many people there are. But you can't even do that because you need 60 votes to be able to really pass anything that's not just a tax bill, essentially. When that happens, you're gonna have people that keep getting elected over and over and over again that fail to deliver on what the majority of people want, like gun control, because it's basically impossible for it to be passed in a substantial way when you need those 60 votes. Because even when Democrats have power, for example, I'll tell you right now, if Democrats had 60 votes in the Senate, we're still not getting gun control passed. And the reason why is because I know whoever the majority leader is going to say, well, David, or well, to the gun safety movement in general, we care about gun safety a lot, but you know what? These senators in North Dakota, wherever those 10 other votes come from in the Senate, they're in too many vulnerable positions right now. We just can't vote on that, so you gotta wait. And it will cost lives. The reason why I'm talking to you right now, and we're having this conversation in the first place, is because both Democrats and Republicans have failed to pass gun control. Thankfully, that has changed in recent years with the first gun control bill being passed in 30 years after Uvalde and Buffalo, where they passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. But Obama had the chance with a filibuster-proof majority to pass gun control legislation, but they didn't when they had that chance, right? And I understand that era was different, but nonetheless, they had the chance and they didn't take it. And that's something that I will never forgive these politicians for, because it's not okay just to directly say that it's one party that's responsible for this when both parties have had power in the past and both have failed to do it. Thankfully, again, though, we've seen that change, and I want people to stay politically engaged. But until we abolish the filibuster, it's going to be impossible for us to pass substantial gun reform.
What does your future hold?
I think my future holds helping get more great young people elected. In the past, I wanted to run for Congress. I said when I was 18 years old, I wanted to run when I was 25. I'm 24 now. I realized in the time since, though, there's a lot more power in helping to get incredible young people elected, so that no matter what happens for me, if one of those death threats ever does become the reality, I can make sure that the movement is still growing, and there's 30 or 40 people in our state governments and Congress that I've helped to elect by substantially helping to fund their campaigns and work with their campaigns to get them elected, so that no matter what happens to me, the gun safety movement has the ultimate insurance policy, which is that generation of people getting elected. So that's what I'm doing now with my organization, Leaders We Deserve, is I'm going to states like Texas, where this year we're spending over $1 million in the state legislature to help elect young people, because we know if we get Texas in the future, forget about Pennsylvania, this can become the keystone state right here in Texas. So that's part of the reason we're trying to lay the groundwork here in this state, not only to change gun laws in the state legislature, but play a 30-year chess game here to help elect some incredible young people like LBJ was when he was 28 years old, when he was first elected right here in Austin, Texas.
David Hogg, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This program was funded by the following: Laura and John Beckworth, BP America, Joe Latimer and Joni Hartgraves, and also by A complete list of funders is available at aptonline.org and live from lbj.org.